Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today we'll be discussing SIDS. So, second video in my reading charts tutorial. We're going to be talking about reading SIDS. I say that we're actually going to be talking about departure procedures, which is an umbrella term that encompasses SIDS, ODPs, and what are they called? Diverse departure, DDs, as I call them. So those are the three types of departures you can get. This is concerning IFR flights. VFR, you're never really going to need these. But, you might. Sometimes there are VFR SIDS and stars. They're rare, but not unheard of. Okay, so we got several different departures. So we have, a lot of people just think there's SIDS and nothing else. It's not true. There's the three. There's SIDS, diverse, and ODP. So what is a SID? Well, a SID is a standard instrument departure, which means they have enough traffic or the procedures from the airport are complex enough that they need to have a graphical depiction of the departure track they want you to take. SIDs can be further divided into RNAV, area navigation, which means you've got to have RNAV equipment to fly them, and let's be honest, who doesn't have RNAV equipment these days? Then you have hybrids, which I'll talk about in a second. And then you have sort of pilot nav SIDs. This is actually more of a radar vector SID where ATC will give you instructions to fly. But it's also called a pilot nav SID where you're sort of left on your own. You just have a general way to take off and get away from the airfield, and then you could get any one of these transitions listed here, and there's a ton of them. Waycross, Alma, Starry, Brunswick, Savannah, you got it. Then you have the hybrids, which are sort of a combination of them. You'll get the ATC vectors to get you away. They'll send you right to Kimmel, and then you go via this depicted path. Now, what other types of departure procedures? Well, we have what's called departure procedures, ODPs, obstacle departure procedures, and what those are is ways to get away from the airfield. They're not always depicted graphically like a SID is. Sometimes they are. Usually they're just in text form, and that means that someone has come and looked at the airfield and said, okay, we need airplanes to go this way to get out of here. The airfield's not big, busy, or drastic enough to need a SID, but you still need to know how to get away from the airfield. Usually, they're runway-specific, ODPs are. Now, you also have the diverse departure. Let's take a look at Alma-Bacon County. If we look at it on the map and diagram here, there's the airfield. We can see it's in the middle of Alma, Georgia. Little runway in the middle of nowhere. I've gone here in several of my videos before. No terrain really around it. As soon as the map loads up. See, there's the airfield there. Not really much terrain around it to speak of. Got some hills over here, but nothing major. So, there's nothing to really get out of here. But we may notice something. Let's talk about the diverse departure real quick. We saw there's nothing in the way out there, and we could safely take off IFR from that field because we know there is arrival procedures published. There's 2 RNAVs, or approaches, published for this airfield. So in order for a diverse departure, a few things have to be met. One, there has to be a published instrument approach. And the reason for that is in order for an instrument approach to be made, someone from the FAA has to actually go to the airfield, look at it, things have to be surveyed, things have to be looked at, measured, all that stuff, so they know where each obstacle is, each hill, mountain, what have you. They know where it's at, and they know how to build the approaches into the airfield. So if there is an approach for that airport, that means someone has come there and looked at it, and then you can also get a departure out of there via proxy, essentially. What this means is if you take off and you climb at least 200 feet per nautical mile, not feet per minute. You can look these charts up if you want, but in the back of every airfield terminal procedure publication, there is a special table. It's the climb descent table. This feet per nautical mile thing, the reason they don't list it in feet per minute is because your feet per minute will change depending on your ground speed. So if it was a feet per nautical, so let's say we need to climb at least 200 feet per nautical mile to meet the diverse departure standards. And let's say we're in a Cessna Skyhawk and our climb speed's around 70 knots. Well, 70 knots in a 200 nautical mile, a 200 feet per nautical mile climb at 70 knots is 215 feet per minute. Close. What if we're in something faster? Let's say a jet. Our climb speed is 180 knots. What's the climb rate? 200 feet per nautical mile. If our climb speed is 180 knots, that's a 635 feet per minute climb. So, our Cessna couldn't do. Well, it could. What if we were flying a Cessna 310 and the climb gradient we needed was something, yada, yada, yada. You get it. The climb gradient changes your feet per minute based on... Your feet per minute needed will change based on speed, but the climb gradient is a constant. As long as you can climb at least 200 feet per nautical mile, and there ain't an aircraft in the world except maybe the Wright Flyer that can't climb that fast, because that's not nothing. And you cross the departure end of the runway. Let's pull up an airfield diagram real quick. I've already closed them out. Hold on a second. Let's pull up an airfield diagram for Atlanta. And then we'll go back to that SID real fast. So there's two ends to a runway. There's the departure end of a runway and the approach end of the runway. So if we're taking off runway 8 left, the approach end is the number 8 left. The numbers on the runway, 8 left, that's the approach end. The departure end is the numbers for the reciprocal runway, 26 right. So if we're taking off 8 left, the departure end of that runway is the numbers for 26 right. Again, taking off 26 right, the departure end of that runway is the numbers for 8 left. So it's the departure end for the reciprocal of the runway is the departure end of the runway. So if we maintain a feet per nautical mile climb of 200 feet per nautical mile, and we cross the departure end of the runway at least 36 feet above it, we are guaranteed, if we fly runway heading to 400 feet before making any turns, to be above all obstacles and terrain within the general area of the airfield. Once we get to 400 feet, we can safely make turns on course. That is a diverse departure. And the requirements for a diverse departure is there has to be an approach published for the airfield, and there can't be any departure procedures such as an ODP or a SID. That's the two requirements you have to have in order to fly the diverse departure. So here at Alma, there's approaches, but there's no ODPs or SIDs. So we can do diverse departure out of Alma. If we went to another airfield, say 3 Juliet 6, there's no approaches for 3 Juliet 6, and there's no arrivals or departures for 3 Juliet 6. That means we can't do the diverse departure there. And it also means there's no ODP or SID, which means if we wanted to depart IFR out of that field, it's a departure at your own risk instruction. You either have to depart VFR and get IFR in the air, or depart IFR via calling flight service on the phone, and it's a departure at your own risk. Okay, what about ODPs? ODPs are fun, as soon as I find the right tab. ODPs are obstacle departure procedures. Again, if there's an approach published, there might be an ODP. So it's important to look if you're planning to depart from this airfield IFR. ODPs are found in the takeoff minimum section. Okay, so I've brought up St. Mary's Airfield, 4 Juliet 6. Let's look at the takeoff minimums. Now, takeoff minimums are published via the publication. So St. Mary's is in the Southeast 3 or 4. Which one is this one? Southeast 4. St. Mary's is in the Southeast 4 publication, and its takeoff minimums is going to cover all airfields in the Southeast 4. And it's sorted by city. So let's find St. Mary's in here. There's Tifton, so we need to go up. Secaucus, Swansboro, Savannah. Go down some. Sylvania, Talladega. St. Mary's, where are you? Swanee, Selma. St. Mary's, here it is. Okay, St. Mary's, 4 Juliet 6, takeoff minimums and obstacle departure procedures. Okay, so right away we know we cannot fly the diverse departure out of St. Mary's because there is an ODP published. We see it right here. Takeoff minimums for runway 4, north restricted airspace. If you look at the chart, you'd see the P50 restricted airspace right next to the runway. It's practically right at the threshold of runway 4, and it goes up to 3,000 feet. So definitely that's something that they want us to avoid. So if we're taking off runway 31, we'd actually be going, if we took off runway 31 and flew runway heading for a while, we'd bust into that restricted airspace and we'd have F-16s on us in a heartbeat. That restricted airspace, or prohibited airspace actually, covers the Kings Bay Naval Base, which is one of the primary naval submarine bases. They got nukes there. It's definitely a pretty high security place. Been there before. Nice. It's a nice base. But they actually closed down they actually had I don't know if they forced them, but the government pretty much said you can't do business here to these guys. There was a parachute jumping school at St. Mary's, Georgia for a while, but they ended up having to close them down because they had problems of people missing the airfield and landing in the base. Yeah, that's great. So that happens. So no parachute jumping there anymore. So if we're taking off runway 31, fly runway heading, we're going to go into that restricted airspace. What if so they've published a departure procedure for runway 31. Okay, so the departure procedure is a climbing right turn heading 320, 2,100 before proceeding northwest bound. So what this means is we need to take off and fly at least 200 feet per nautical mile, cross the departure end of the runway at about 50 to 100 feet, and once we're above 100 feet above the field elevation, we need to make the heading 320 turn and fly 320 until we're at 2,100. Then we can proceed northwest bound. That should keep us clear of the restricted airspace. That's the only departure procedure they have published. That tells us a lot. If we're departing one of the other runways, we know we need to stay out of the area that is northeast of the airfield. So I guess we could do diverse departures on any of the other runways. So if we're taking off to the south, it's not going to be a big deal. We could do diverse departure off runway 4 or any of the other 2 runways as long as we stay out of the northeast area. If we're taking off runway 31, IFR, we have to follow this procedure. So sometimes these might be depicted. They're very rarely are they ever depicted like SIDS are. But here, you look in the takeoff minimums, find your city, and see if there is a ODP. If there's not an ODP and there's not a SID, then you know you can fly the diverse departure. If there is no approach to the airfield, then there's no diverse departure. So lastly, the reason everyone came here, let's talk about SIDS. Let's talk about these pilot nav SIDS. So if we're taking off from Jackson International, runway 8, what do we do? Well, I can look at here and tell you we're going to take off runway 8 and fly heading 077 and expect radar vectors to one of these transitions. So these are sort of a radar vectored approach. Procedure not available for aircraft filed below 10,000 feet. So if we're going to use this SID, we have to file an altitude higher than 10,000 feet. Are there any other restrictions? Obstacle notes? Nope. So there's no restrictions that this is a turbojet SID. We just have to be able to go up to 10,000 feet. Okay. Takeoff minimums, runway 8142632 standard. So 200 feet per nautical mile to 36 feet above the departure end of the runway. Note, chart not to scale. They almost never are. So let's say we were taking off runway 8 again. Climb heading 077 thence. ... Go down till we find the ... Here it is. Climb heading 077. Maintain 3,000 feet or assigned altitude. Expect clearance to requested altitude 10 minutes after departure. So what this means is we'll take off 077 and we'll contact departure control and they'll give us vectors to one of these fixes. So if we're taking off runway 8 and we're heading west, they'll say 077, 3,000 feet, contact departure. We go to departure, hi departure, how you doing? They say, okay, fly heading 310, vectors to Valdosta. So let's say Valdosta is now our transition we're using. They're sending us to Valdosta, 310. Then they say, 310 to get us away from the airfield. Then they say fly direct Valdosta. Proceed direct Valdosta, and then on the route from there. Okay, so that's how that one works. Pretty easy. That's basically radar vectors. This is published so you know your takeoff and climb minimums. For instance, they don't want you going higher than 3,000 feet until they've identified you on the radar. And you know these transitions can be used. Now, these things are published for the main purpose of lost communication. If we lose our radios, if we're told to contact departure, we acknowledge, and then we switch to departure, and then the radios die. Just at that point, okay, we have lost communications. We know we've lost communications. What do? We fly runway heading. What does this say? 3,000 assigned altitude, expect clearance. Then we'll fly to 3,000, runway heading to 3,000 feet, and then direct to whatever transition we were getting. If we were been told by clearance delivery which transition it would be, if it was the ALMA transition, we proceed direct in the ALMA VORTAC. So that's it. That's that one. Let's look at a hybrid. Or actually, let's look at an RNAV one first. Here's an RNAV out of Atlanta. Atlanta has some fun departures. So an RNAV will give you a specific track they want you to follow. So if we take off runway, this is 26, left right here, we'll fly heading 275, and then the 288 track, direct Snuffy, and then 245 to Slaw, 215 to Riggs, 181 to Styles, and then once we pass Styles, we can accelerate above 250, 122 to Punnett, and then 150 to Macon. Now, we can see we have two transitions. We have either the Punnett transition, so the SID technically ends at Punnett, and we can go wherever from that. There's also the Macon transition, where we'll fly to Punnett, then to Macon. And how you can tell this is that the procedure itself will be a bold line, and that is a line that you absolutely, probably, most likely will have to follow. A thinner line like this indicates that you have a transition. Also note, if it's a thin line, but it doesn't have an altitude, if it just has a course, then that's not a transition. That's a theme replicated throughout all of the charts, and that is if you see a thin line that only has a course, that's for navigation purposes, that is not a route you can fly. If it's a thin line with a course and distance, and most notably an altitude associated with it, a minimum en-route altitude for that line, then you can fly that. That means that is a route you can take. So if these altitudes weren't here, then we couldn't fly this because it's just a navigation. These altitudes are here, so we know we can fly that. And that's really it. The main thing with RNAV stars is meeting the climb restrictions. So first, let's take a look at the notes. Can we fly this at all? If unable to accept climb rate, advise ATC. I don't know a single aircraft. Well, it's a standard climb rate, but a 500 foot per nautical mile to 1,500. After that, it's standard. The standard climb rate is 200 feet per nautical mile. So 500 feet per nautical mile until 1,527. Let's just round that up to 1,600. Screw it. So 500 feet per nautical mile to 1,600 feet, and then 200 feet per nautical mile minimum. You can go faster than that, but minimum, that's what you need to have. Use departure frequency depicted unless otherwise assigned. So departure control, if we're departing 26 left, like we said we were, departure control is on 125.7 unless they tell us otherwise. Here's the first restriction, turbojet only. So the only way we're going to fly this SID is if we are a jet. Second restriction, DME, IRU, or GPS required. That means we have to have DME, inertial reference unit, or GPS. That is also an FMS. That's sort of implied that the IRU is basically an FMS, so is the GPS and the DME. So FMS can fly this, even though it doesn't specifically say FMS. RNAV 1 type SID, radar required for non-GPS equipped aircraft. So if we don't have a GPS, we cannot fly this SID if the radar for the Atlanta area is not working. Transponder code will be issued via PDC or Atlanta clearance delivery. Really only applies if you are a carrier. If you're flying for Delta, AirTran, Southwest, you'll get your clearance through PDC. Anyone else gets through clearance delivery. Aircraft at midfield ramps, advise ramp towers to departure SID prior to pushback. Upon receipt of ATC clearance from Atlanta Clearance Delivery, read back only your call sign, transponder code, unless you have a question. That is a notation. Atlanta's extremely busy airfield, busiest airfield in the world, actually. I think Dubai may have dethroned them. I can't remember, but it's definitely either the first or the second busiest airfield in the world is this airfield here, Atlanta Hartsfield, and yeah, it's very busy, but very efficient. So what that's saying is when we talk to ramp control prior to pushback, we need to advise them of our departure SID. And if we get our clearance through PDC, if we get our clearance through clearance delivery, when they don't want us to read back that clearance. So you say Cessna 13312 cleared to the Atlanta class Bravo via radar vectors to wherever then is filed, or any other IFR clearance by clearance delivery. Once we get it, write it down, make sure everything's correct. We only read back the transponder code. So instead of reading back our full clearance, we just say Cessna 13312 squawk 0217. That's it. And that is them acknowledging. The only time we don't read back the transponder code is if we miss something or have a question or whatever. So write down our clearance. Make sure we get it right. If we have a question, ask. If we know we got it right, then we'll just read back the transponder code. Good to go. The reason is clearance delivery at Atlanta is very busy. So, okay. Now here we have another notation, which almost debunks the noise abatement procedures. Airlines will fly with a noise abatement procedure, and that requires a specific climb rate and thrust reduction at a certain point and flap retraction at a certain point. But here it almost gets thrown out the window by this. It says accelerate to 250 knots if unable, advise at ATC. That means immediately after departure, they want us accelerating to 250. They don't want us maintaining a slower speed. Get up to 250 and get out of their hair. That's what that means. And we have to maintain 250 until styles. I think that also overrides the 10,000 foot thing. So even if we cross 10,000 feet prior to styles, we still have to maintain 250 until past styles. That's for sequencing. They don't want anyone accelerating until this. And then here's the text version. SIDs always have a graphic depiction. You usually have a text version up here as well, and that basically just backs up the graphics. So again, if we go 26 left was our departure runway, climb heading 275, intercept course 288 to Snuffy, then on depicted route to Punnet. Note they did not give us an altitude. Some of the runways you may see, like 8 left, climb heading 095 until 1527, then turn right. But here they just want us to depict to intercept the 288 course to Snuffy. So almost treat Snuffy as a VOR in that regard. So you'll have a radial 288 coming off of Snuffy. They want you to intercept that. So they want you to fly the 288 track to Snuffy. So 26 left, climb heading 275, intercept 288 to Snuffy, then on depicted route to Punnet, maintain 250 until styles thence. Maintain 10,000 or requested altitude if lower, expect clearance to filed altitude 10 minutes after departure. So let's go over. If we're departing 26 left, 275 until we intercept the 288 course to Snuffy. Maintain 250, climb in a 10, slaw, rigs. We're probably at 10,000 feet somewhere between rigs and styles. So we maintain 250, keep on climbing. Usually once we are identified once we contact the departure, they have us on the radar. They'll see your initial altitude restriction is going to be 10,000 feet. That's what clearance is going to give you. So Delta 1087, clear to wherever via the Punnet 8 departure, climb via SID, maintain 10,000 feet, departure with whoever, squawk, whatever. So once we've switched over to departure control, they have us on the radar, they will say, climb, maintain 15,000, or something like that. That means we can now climb above 10,000 feet. So 10,000 feet no longer applies. Climbing above 10,000 feet, hit styles, accelerate at 250. Once they get you up to 15,000, and once you cross 10,000, they usually switch you over to center. Once center has you on the radar, they'll clear you up higher. That takes about less than 10 minutes, so less than 10 minutes you can expect clear to your filed altitude or whatever altitude ATC's told you you're going to get. And then we just go to the depicted route to Punnet. Now it says depicted route. Where was it at? 2-6 left. Depicted route to punt it. It doesn't mention Macon, and again, Macon is a transition. So punt it is where the SID actually ends. From punt it, we can go wherever. But Macon is the transition. So from punt it, we could go to Alma if we wanted to, because Alma is further down, but it's out of the way. Macon, Eastman, wherever. So punt it's just the end point. Macon's the transition. We may not get Macon. We could go wherever, but let's just say, for the sake of the argument, we're going Macon. So punt it. Then Macon, we have to fly the 150 track. The Macon, it's a 29-mile leg, and the minimum en route altitude for terrain clearance is 2,200. For nav aid reception is 6,000. We'll be well above the minimums there. So that's an RNAV SID. What about this one? This is sort of a hybrid SID. It's both pilot nav and RNAV in a way. It's so pilot nav, like this one where we got fly headings and then direct, we see the same thing replicated here. So first thing, let's look at any notes. Let me find the notes. Where are they? Where are they? RNAV 1, turbojets only, so only your jet. DME, RU, GPS, so got to have an FMS or GPS or something like that. Radar required, which means the Jackson International radar has to be functioning. Will not get this SID if the Jackson radar is down. If unable to accept climb rate, advise ATC on initial contact. So, yeah, we'll have to advise clearance or tower or somebody that we cannot accept the climb rate. What's the climb rate? Standard with a minimum climb of 500 feet per nautical mile to 540 feet. We're just rounding that up to 600. So 500 feet per nautical mile to 600 feet, and then 200 feet per nautical mile after that. That's your takeoff minimums. Can we meet that? Most aircraft can. Cessna 152 or Piper Cub might not be able to meet that. But then again, are you going to be flying IFR in one of those planes? I guess you could do it in a 152, but I wouldn't want to, depending on the equipment the 152 has. Okay, we got optical information. Let's not worry about that. So let's say we can fly this SID. What's going to happen? Okay, so we'll take off runway 8, fly heading 077 to 540, and then what? Arrows. We'll get radar vectors to Kimmel, most likely, is what that's indicating. That arrow indicates radar vectors. Here's the route we're going to get, Kimmel. So they'll probably tell us to fly direct Kimmel and then via the depicted route from there. So let's look at the text. Runway 8, climb heading 077 to 540, or let's just say 600. Then climb to assigned altitude on heading 077 or as assigned by ATC thence. So whatever altitude ATC assigned us in our clearance will most likely be 3,000. We'll climb that on 077. And that's for lost communications. So once we contact departure control, they're going to give us radar vectors to Kimmel anyway. If we lose radio communication, then we need to start using the lost comm stuff, which means if we lose radio communication like we did before, we acknowledged the switch over from tower, but we couldn't raise departure on the radio. What do? Climb 077 until the cleared altitude, which was 3,000 or whatever they gave us. And once we hit 3,000, we can proceed direct Kimmel. And that's the lost comms for that. And then as depicted. So that's what they're going to be expecting you to do if you lose your radios. Okay, thence. So climb 077 at 500, then assigned altitude to 077 as assigned, and thence. Expect radar vectors to Kimmel on track 339 to Arnie, maintain 3,000 or as assigned by ATC. Expect clearance to filed altitude 10 minutes after departure. So this is a pretty easy one. We'll fly 077 to 600 feet, contact departure, maintain 077 to 3,000 or until they give us something else. So let's say we switch to departure, we're climbing through 1,000, they'll say fly heading 360, climb and maintain 15,000. Okay, so we fly heading 360, going up to 15,000, we're passing 5,000, proceed direct Kimmel. Direct Kimmel, we're good to go. Now, that covers SIDs, ODPs, and diverse departures. One other thing I want to go into, which is a new terminology, which is the climb via SID. What that basically means is they want you to climb via the SID. Before, they would give you altitudes. Now they just give you climb via SID. So your IFR clearance would be Delta 1085, clear to Atlanta via Arnie to departure, Baxley transition, then is filed, climb and maintain 3000, expect 28,000, or flight level 280, 10 minutes after departure on whatever, squawk, whoever. I got that backwards. But whatever. So that means, that's the old way. Now they'll just say, Delta 1087, clear to Atlanta via the Arnie to departure, Baxley transition, then is filed, climb via SID, departure on whoever, squawk, whatever. A lot quicker, a lot easier. What that means is they just want you to climb via the published SID. That's it. So that means all these altitudes apply. When they gave you, see, it was a bit weird the old way because they gave you the climb maintain 3000. They gave you the SID, then they gave you a climb maintain 3000, which in any other case would mean all these altitudes go out the window. Just maintain the standard climb rate until we hit this whatever, until we tell you otherwise. That doesn't apply anymore. Climb via SID now means they want us to follow these minimums. So the standard climb rate, 500 feet per nautical mile to 600 or 540, whichever one you want to use. I just round it up. It's easier. And then we'll expect these crossing altitudes. So we can expect 3,000 as our initial altitude restriction. Once approach control has us on the radar, they'll clear us up to 11,000. We can expect we'll be at least 11,000 by the time we reach Arnie. Note the minimum en route altitude for NavAid reception, at least for the Alma leg, is 16,000. 17,000 for Baxley, but Baxley's a waypoint anyway, so it doesn't really matter. 16,000, so we can assume we're going to be higher than 16,000 by the time we hit Arnie, even though it has at minimum you want to be at 11,000. So, yep, that's essentially what climb via SID means. Just climb as depicted on the SID until told otherwise. So, if ATC gives us an altitude after this, then that pretty much throws everything out the window. No longer do we need to climb via SID, just climb as quick as possible to whatever altitude. At least 500 feet per minute. All right, that covers SIDs. Next, we'll talk about en route charts, which is going to be fun, I think. That's where the bulk of the information lies. Real quick, before we end this video, though, I want you to look, a little bit of homework for you. Look over different departure procedures for airports in your area and sort of get used to the way things are depicted. Solid line versus bold line. The bar under the altitude versus over the altitude, and things like that. We're going to be talking about that stuff a lot more in the en route portion. And I'm also going to give you another recommendation. I'm doing these very quick because I want the videos to be quick, and there's no way to make these videos entertaining. We're just looking at numbers. But I want them to be fast because I try to keep my videos short because, you know, people's attention spans are short. If you want to learn the most of information via watching a video on YouTube, I will link to a channel in the description of every one of these videos, and that will take you to the Pilot Edge ATC channel. And Keith Smith, the owner-operator of Pilot Edge, has done very, very good videos talking about all this. He talks about everything I just covered and then some, goes into extreme detail. Very, very good videos. Keith Smith's very good pilot, and he's the runner. He runs Pilot Edge, so he knows his way around the ATC network and everything. The drawback with those videos is they are incredibly boring, you know, because it's a boring subject. There's really no way to make this entertaining unless you're like me and you're just entertained by odd things. And they are also incredibly long. They are the shortest one's an hour and a half, and the longest one's 2.5 hours. So definitely clear your schedule. I've been watching them. Very, very good videos he's got going on there. So I'll link to his channel in the description. He's got several videos. Highly recommend you check them out. Clear your schedule. They are long, they are boring, they are dry, but they are funny sometimes, and they are good and informative, and that's the most important thing. And if you find something on those videos that conflicts with what I said, go with what Keith said. He's the expert. I'm not an instrument-rated pilot. I'm just telling you what I know. So, yeah. So this covers departure procedures, both SIDS, ODPs, and diverse departures. And from here on out, and things get fun. So Country Flyboy here. We'll see you next time.